mushroom superfoods. I'm a mushroom nerd, been that way for years. I was lucky enough to find work where I could, my nerdiness, I could support myself with my nerdiness. And I have the honor of introducing a couple of very intelligent and smart and really driving women that would join our organization and really strengthen it. Dr. Julie Daoust, she studied at the University of British Columbia in natural chemistry and products. She became very interested in mushrooms. I think she'll tell you about her pathway that brought her to mushrooms. We also have Jay Schmalz, who is our formulator and works with commercializing the R&D that we're going to talk about, trying to translate it to the consumers so they understand what it is we're talking about. Now, some of this stuff is kind of deep. We're going to try to challenge you and pay attention, because actually there's a prize. We're going to ask a question at the end, and the first one that can answer the prize correctly gets a swag bag, one of our own mushroom bags, and the honor of at least having stayed awake.
Come on, Steve. We'll keep everyone awake here.
So with no further ado, be prepared to get intrigued and to understand all the incredible ways that mushrooms can impact our health in very positive ways. And it's a local company. We do it all up in North County. It's all in-house, everything from strain development, spawn work, to the finished product and processes and shipping it out. So it's support your local businesses. And there's a lot of local business here today. And we got to, if you're still around here later this afternoon, another one of our colleagues is doing a talk on truffles later in the day. So that'll be a good talk as well.
What time?
2 o'clock?
I think it's 1:20.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so pay attention.
All right, thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to talk about the work that we've done on the impact of mushrooms and the microbiome, and to share a little bit about what we do at On Mushroom and M2 Ingredients. M2 Ingredients is our B2B company, so we sell mushrooms to other brands, cosmetic companies, pharmaceutical companies, pet health companies. So we are the largest functional mushroom grower in North America, and we're right here in Vista. So I became interested in mushroom as a child. I'm from a foraging family, so we are French, and the French love chanterelles and boletes, and we'd go out in the woods as a family and collect mushrooms. And then I became aware of reishi mushrooms and lion's mane mushrooms by seeing them in the woods, and got really interested in the traditional usage of those mushrooms. And then, went on with my education and came across mushroom again when I was doing my PhD. We were looking for new drug leads and new molecules in different organisms, and mushroom are part of the next frontier of discovery for new drug leads. And that's how my career met mushrooms again, and then spent a bunch of time in the supplement and plant food industry. And I'd met M2 Ingredients through that. I was sourcing mushrooms from M2 Ingredients, and one day they reached out and asked me to lead their scientific team. And I was like, yes, where do I sign, right? So it's been a dream come true, and I work with an incredible team. Everybody is specialized in their own different ways. We have mycologists, chemists, and Jay's a do-it-all. She's a biochemist, formulator, an amazing scientist, and I'm very lucky to work with her. So I'm glad that we're presenting together today.
Me too. I grew up with a family that did not like mushrooms or vegetables generally. But,
Is your family here today?
yeah, my dad is right there.
Come on, we need to get you to eat mushrooms.
I don't like them.
So one of my favorite things to do was, I was also a vegetarian in this family. So one of my favorite things to do was to hide vegetables, including mushrooms, in our food and make it taste delicious. And then when we're all eating dinner and being like, wow, this is really good, I'd be like, did you know there's mushrooms in it? Which of course they'd be like, oh. curriculum. So I didn't think that that would eventually become my professional career, which is making healthy things taste delicious on the regular. So as a formulator, that's where a lot of my passion lies there, is making natural supplements, mushroom powders, a really enjoyable experience that is delicious and can be part of a daily routine, like mushroom coffee. So that's kind of what led me to love what I do.
A lot of people are scared of the taste of mushrooms,
Yes.
and they're being little babies about it. And so, and so Jay's work is really to change that paradigm, and she's really good at it. So,
Yay.
all right. So we'll talk a little bit about what we do, but this isn't a commercial pitch, but just so you have context for what we're doing. We'll talk about traditional usage and research at large on digestive health and mushrooms, and then our own research.
Great. So the M2 story. We cultivate 10 different species in our state-of-the-art facility in Vista. It's 150,000 square feet, and it's been up and going since for about a year now. It's incredibly impressive and really no one else is doing anything like it. The way that we culture all these mushrooms, 10 different species, is a lot to culture in the same medium, and we have a great team of mycologists that works very hard to make every mushroom species happy that we grow, and provide the best benefits and the best environment as well. We've been around for over 10 years on the M2 side. And our wonderful, amazing founders have just been amazing leaders. You've met Steve. And then this is a picture of Sandra Carter, our other co-founder, who is a delight.
And just from a, we're on Park Center by Home Depot in Vista. And their story, just from a business perspective, is really unique because both Steve and Sandra, so Steve's a mycologist, Sandra's background is in preventative health. She has a PhD in preventative medicine. And they met here in San Diego and decided well into their 50s to do a startup, which, you know, not a lot of people do. And so I think it's really inspiring to start a business from scratch into your 50s. That's a very unique story, and it inspires me to challenge myself every day. All right, so I told you guys that my background's in chemistry, and when we're looking for new chemistry, new drug leads, new functional benefits in organisms, there's a couple things we look for. And the kingdom of fungi, and by the way, you can say fungi, fungi, it's all right, so don't be shy. A lot of people try to not say the word because they're a bit confused about how to pronounce it. So the kingdom of fungi, where mushrooms lie, is 1.5 million species broad. And we're not quite sure of the numbers because new species are being discovered every day. So when you think of that, and you think of medicinal plants, and all the plants that we use for functional health, like elderberry, ashwagandha, mint, ginger, ginseng, those are part of the kingdom of plants, which is only 250,000 species. So just in terms of sheer biodiversity and diversity of organisms and of the chemistry they can produce, fungi are really interesting, and that's what makes them the next frontier in functional ingredient discovery. The other thing that's important to notice is that fungi are more closely related to animals than plants are. So we share a lot of cellular pathways with fungi. We breathe in oxygen, exhale CO2. We need to actually eat carbon sources, right? We can't just fix it from light. So we're much closer, and therefore chemistry that helps the mushroom protect itself and live better can actually work in our cells more closely. So more chances of finding something interesting in mushroom. Next slide. The other part that's really interesting, and as a chemist, what we were looking for to find interesting chemistry, we were looking for soft organisms, things that didn't have claws, teeth, shells, cuticles, waxy outer protection. So things that could only defend themselves through their chemistry. And mushrooms are that, right? And when you think of mycelium, mycelium is the part of the mushroom that's in the substrate, so underground or in the wood. That's what the mushroom lives as the most. So in the life stage of the mushroom, the organisms will spend most of its time as mycelium. And the mycelium is one cell layer thick, and it's really permeable. So it's very fragile from a physical standpoint. So it essentially wages a chemical warfare on its environment to protect itself. So lots of antibiotics, antivirals, et cetera, and that's why it's such an interesting source of chemistry. And traditionally, mycelium wasn't used a lot, right? Maybe Cordyceps was one where, you'd eat the bug and the mushroom, so you'd eat the mycelium. But for species like reishi or lion's mane, the mycelium was stuck in the wood. So it's not that there's no value to mycelium, it's that for a long time we just couldn't access it. But now with modern growing techniques, we're actually able to access it. So you'll see a ton of research now is focused on mycelium because the mycelium produces really interesting chemistry. All right, next slide. I clicked, sorry. All right, so these are just beautiful pictures of some of the species we grow. And let's move on to the next slide. So functional mushrooms are used a lot. They're having a moment, right? And I think they're really here to stay. When you think of all the medicinal plants we use and all the different species that people know and like to use, mushrooms are becoming that way now. So people recognize the name lion's mane and reishi. Just a few years ago, we'd be asked, like, is lion's mane vegan? Is there lion? Or what about turkey tail? Is that feathers? No, they're mushrooms. So people are starting to really recognize each species and understand the benefit of each species. A lot of people still consume mushrooms for their immune benefits. All mushrooms have some immune benefits, and we'll talk a little bit about why. Some, more broad effect than others. You'll see a lot of mushroom usage for energy. So you see that with Cordyceps and lion's mane. And digestive health is at the top of the list there, and we'll spend most of our talk today speaking about that. Yes?
Would you mind going back once and get a picture?
Of the, yeah,
I
sure.
have to tell you, growing up in Indiana, turkey tails, I never knew what that was. Oh, they're everywhere. And what kind of my family sees this? Thank you.
All right. So mushrooms have been used traditionally for a really long time. So in traditional Chinese medicine, but also throughout the world. So in Europe, in Egypt. Here's an example of a hieroglyph with some depiction of mushrooms. So those are most likely psilocybe, which were used for their functional benefits as well. There was actually, I can't remember his name now, I'm blanking, but a cadaver that was about 5,000 years old was found in the Italian Alps, and in a little pouch on its belt were mushrooms. So, yeah. And we've seen also the representation of mushroom uses in Greek medicine. In America, we are seeing a mushroom renaissance now, and definitely First Nation folks were using mushrooms like agarikon and turkey tail and other. But when pilgrims came over, the association of psilocybe mushrooms and kind of those rituals were regarded really negatively by the church and so on. And so the use of mushrooms kind of got vilified. And that's probably why we have a bit of a mycophobia. So a lot of people are like really scared of mushroom, of picking mushrooms. And for sure you have to be careful, but there's also poisonous plants out there, and you don't see people, up in arms about foraging for different plants, right? So we're rediscovering it, but in a lot of places, like in Asia, mushrooms have been used for thousands of years, and they're still in use today and very broadly used. So I'll talk a little bit about digestive health and some unusual maybe or surprising facts. So lion's mane, which we use a lot for cognitive health today, and that's what we know it for. traditionally in TCM, in traditional Chinese medicine, it was actually used for digestive health. And now that we kind of start to understand the gut-brain axis and the importance of digestive health and the microbiome on our cognitive health, maybe there's that link there, and that's certainly something that we wanted to investigate in the research we'll talk about. Cordyceps was also used for digestive health to regulate kidney function and also as a tonic for vitality. And reishi was used for many, many things and considered one of the most important plant or fungus, right? We always kind of mix the two in traditional Chinese medicine. And it was used for liver health, gastric ulcers, and to manage diabetes in China, in Japan, and in Korea. And here's a little representation of reishi that's 1,000 years old. All right, so mushrooms are prebiotics. So get mushrooms in your diet because as Americans, or Canadian, I'm Canadian, we don't eat enough fiber. So mushrooms have a lot of fiber in it, both insoluble and soluble, and things like chitin, alpha-glucans, beta-glucans are important. We hear a lot about beta-glucans in mushrooms. Beta-glucans are a type of fiber that's found in all the cell walls of all the mushrooms. The mycelium, the fruit body, all the parts of the mushrooms have it, and all mushrooms have it. So it doesn't make each mushroom unique, and it's certainly not the key to the efficacy of each individual mushroom and what makes them unique. It is an immunomodulating molecule, so it does support your immune system, and that's probably why you see immunity as like a benefit for so many mushrooms is from beta-glucan. Chitin is also found in all cell wall of mushrooms. And for a long time, we thought that chitin wasn't digestible, but we know now that that's not the case. So next slide. Our formatting got a little wonky here. All right, chitin. So a lot of people for a long time were worried about consuming a lot of mushrooms because they felt like it might be difficult or impossible to digest. We actually, as humans, produce chitinase, and we all have the genes coding for chitinase. For some who are being babies about eating mushrooms, that enzyme isn't being produced. But if you introduce a little bit of mushroom, or if your daughter sneaks mushroom into your food, you'll eventually develop chitinase, and you'll be able to digest mushroom. If you eat a lot of shellfish and you actually like eat the tail of the shrimp and things like that, that has chitin too. So you would actually produce chitinase, and same with eating insects because it's in the cell wall of the insects. So we can actually digest chitin. It's a prebiotic fiber, so there's actually advantages to digest it. So, and it has immunomodulating responses, and it can also increase insulin sensitivity, so it can have really good benefit from a metabolic health perspective. Then beta-glucans we talked about, so they're a type of fiber that our microbiome digests. So we don't actually digest it. It's the little bacteria in our gut that digest beta-glucans. Beta-glucans do promote short-chain fatty acid production, and we'll talk about what those are in a minute, but very important molecules that are produced in the gut with all kinds of health benefits. And beta-glucans are immunomodulating and can be important in cholesterol management. So all kinds of good reason to eat any mushroom, and yeast would have some of this as well. So, all right.
I'm going to talk a bit about some current research on mushrooms and the microbiome. So given the large amount of historical use and the immune modulating interest in mushrooms, as the microbiome has been a subject of more and more interest of research, we're realizing that there's huge connection between our immune system and our microbiome, or the bacteria in our gut. So mushrooms have been researched pretty well, and it's gaining more and more. So I'm going to talk about a few interesting newer research articles on some different species. So I just wanted to start really quickly on why the microbiome matters. How many of you are aware of what the microbiome is and what it does for us? Okay, cool. Awesome. Yay, gut health. So the microbiome is a more like recently discovered thing. I like to relate it to mushrooms because I think both of them were things that researchers had kind of a fear around, and so didn't study very much until more recently. So that when we discovered the microbiome, if you put all the cells together of bacteria that are in our gut, it's like the size of our brain, and it's basically a whole new organ that we're just learning to research, and the amount of symbiosis that it has with our body and all the things that it does for it. So these are just some of the functions that our gut microbiota does for us. So it influences our immune system. It actually helps our immune system balance and develop. So it's super important for immune health, and it helps with vascularization, or creating more blood flow to the gut so that we absorb our nutrients better. It also helps with neurological signaling, which has been really fascinating to learn about. So the gut-brain axis, that our microbes in our gut talk to our brain, and they communicate things like we're full, or a lot of like anxiety-related disorders and other neurological disorders have been linked to our gut microbes, which is fascinating, right? And so we're continuing to research that and gain more about it. Also, our vitamins K and B are biosynthesized by the microbes in our gut. So we absolutely need them, right? Those are essential nutrients, as well as a lot of steroid hormones and neurotransmitters, serotonin, GABA. A lot of those are controlled by our gut. Really cool stuff.
Most of our serotonin is made by the microbiome, which is crazy because that's a really important neurotransmitter linked to mood.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then in this orange box, you could just see all of the different disease indications that dysbiosis in our gut has been linked to and is currently being researched. So it's just really fascinating how much our gut microbes affect about our whole body, all over. So something I find really interesting that's coming out in recent research is that a lot of the benefits that mushrooms species are specifically known for, they're being studied in relation to how they relate to the microbiome or the gut, or if they're microbiome mediated. So reishi has been used for thousands of years traditionally, and it's also probably the most researched mushroom when it comes to the prebiotic effect. There's actually to the point where there's been several review articles on it. And then this is a more recent study that came out actually showing that the sleep benefits of reishi. So reishi is known as an adaptogen. It helps our bodies deal with everyday stress, and it helps us with rest and recuperation and sleep. So this is a study in mice that was showing that the sleep benefits of reishi are actually microbiome dependent. So when the mice were fed antibiotics before they ate the reishi or didn't eat the reishi, it actually kept from happening. So these A-B conditions were fed antibiotics beforehand, and you can see it knocked out the benefit of a shorter time to fall asleep, a longer sleeping time, and higher HTP concentrations in our hypothalamus. And this was a mouse study. But I thought that was really fascinating, that without the microbiome, you don't see that benefit. It's really neat. Lion's mane has also been studied as it affects our mood state and our cognitive health. It's been studied in relation to how the microbiome might play in that. So I wanted to talk about two different studies here. The first one involves age-related neuroinflammation. Lion's mane has also been studied in relation to age and health span. And as we get older, there's higher levels of inflammation that occur in our brain. We can see cell shrinkage and stuff like that that's mediated by an inflammatory process. And so consumption of lion's mane in elderly mice, it helped ameliorate the cell shrinkage that you would see with that kind of neuroinflammation, which was really interesting. And it also modulated the microbiome. And the species that it increased and decreased are really interesting. So it increased species that have been correlated in other studies with reducing gut and neuroinflammation, with being reduced in patients with dementia or cognitive impairments, and lion's mane increased that species, right? It decreased species related to things like it's associated with decreased neuroplasticity, which is our neurons' ability to be changing and plastic and growing. So it decreases species that was associated with halting that process, as well as memory dysfunctions and Alzheimer's, species that have been studied in correlation to that. So I find it really interesting, even though there's just a few species that we're focusing on here, they're all related to cognitive health in other studies, and lion's mane specifically adjusted those. And then another more recent study just came out in 2024. This was in humans, and it studied the microbial composition as well as levels of grain-derived neurofactor and neuropeptide Y. And these compounds are known for our nerve health, our brain health, and neuroplasticity. And it found that lion's mane increased the microbial diversity, or the number of species, types of species that are in our gut, so that there's more diversity in there. And it found that increased microbial diversity was positively correlated with neuropeptide Y and brain-derived nootropic factor levels, which is really interesting. Cordyceps is a mushroom that has been studied a lot for its effect on metabolic diseases like diabetes and high cholesterol. And so in more recent years, there's been interest in correlating that to how it affects the gut microbiome as well. So this was a mouse study, and these mice were fed a high-fat diet to simulate metabolic disease. And you can see that from these graphs that cordyceps stopped a lot of the negative effects that a high-fat diet caused. So on the colorful graph on the right, you'll see high-fat diet is the leftmost column. No diet, so just a normal mouse diet is the one over. So you can see microbial diversity decreases a lot. It's this red bar is one genus, and so it's really just taking over the gut. More colors, more diversity, right? So, and then you can see in the treatments to the right, which is a cordyceps extract or a cordycepin, it stopped that from happening even though they were fed the high-fat diet. So and not only did it stop it from happening, but it increased diversity even more between firmiculates and bacteria. So, and then you'll see here we have, it's a little blurry, but so there's an increase in oxidation that happens with a high-fat diet. This one here. So this is high-fat diet. Superoxide dismutase is associated with our ability to regulate oxidative states and free radicals. So there's more oxidation when we eat a high-fat diet. No diet, high-fat diet, and then all the cordyceps conditions kept that from happening. As well as LDL cholesterol on the side there. You'll see no diet, high-fat diet goes right up, and the cordyceps treatments kept that from happening. So, and then these are just immune functions here. So it also helped decrease immune inflammation that wasn't even caused by high-fat diet. So just normal than both no diet and high-fat. So I thought this was really interesting, just that researchers are looking more at the effects of mushrooms and how those might be caused in conjunction with the microbes in our gut, which also do a lot of the same things. Yeah.
All right. Switching
Can I
gears.
ask a question? I know we extrapolate from the studies of mice to the effects with humans, but are are there studies going on actually using humans or?
Yeah, so one of those lion's mane studies was in humans, the neuropeptide Y and BNDF study. That was a small-scale preclinical trial that was in humans. And there's also been a few other studies in humans. There's been 3 for reishi. And we're working on one. I'm bubbling.
And what we'll present now is a study that was done in the ex vivo model, so an artificial gut, but it was essentially that's how you study prebiotic in this way for the results we were looking for. And we were using real people's microbiome. So it's not a very fun field of work because you need to collect poop sample from people and then like ferment them, but we hired a lab to do that. We didn't have to do it. We just focused on growing mushrooms. I just wanted to flash this up because there's a lot of different mushroom products, and just so you understand like what exactly we produce. And there's no like good reason. It's just like with plants, right? You can drink a mint tea and then have a tincture of mint, and it kind of depends what you're trying to do. So I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not going to go into the whole extract, not extract debate here. I think there's a room for it all, but we produce at M2 Ingredients our own, both the mycelium and the fruit body, and we do that in a solid state fermentation. And what our finished product is, it's a whole mushroom product. So we don't extract it. We essentially grow the mushroom, dry it, and mill it. So very little processing, and it's a whole food product. So we'll go to the next slide. So, okay, we embarked in a prebiotic study with a group out of Belgium. They specialize in prebiotic studies and collecting poop sample from people. And they also do animal studies. And we were joking, do you guys go to dog park? And which they do. So the people that donated their samples were healthy individuals, so they didn't have, you know, IBS or any kind of digestive health disorder, and they also had not taken antibiotics for the last 6 months, so to have a stable microbiome. And we looked at different markers of a prebiotic during that study. So a prebiotic will lower the pH in your colon. That means that there's lactobacteria that are there and that lower the pH, and those are beneficial bacteria. So we want to look for that. We also wanted to understand the level of gas produced. So all fiber will create gas, right? And that leads to bloating and farting and all of that, right? And so a good prebiotic technically should have good benefits, but not be too crazy on the gas scale, right? So inulin is a great prebiotic, right? Great effects on all kinds of factors, but it tends to be a little hard on the stomach. A lot of people experience like bloating, discomfort, and so on when they consume inulin. So that's an example of a good prebiotic with like really high gas production. So we wanted to, you know, understand that, where are mushrooms located on the scale. And then we wanted to look at short chain fatty acid production. So there's 3 short chain fatty acids that are produced in the gut, and all 3 have tons of beneficial outcomes. Butyrate is one of them, and butyrate has impact on improved mood, reducing inflammation, improving digestive health, improving metabolic health as well. So it's a super important short chain fatty acid. And if you guys are like tuned in to sport performance, there's a lot right now coming out on butyrate and recovery after exercise. So we wanted to understand the production of those short chain fatty acid by the microbiome when fed mushrooms, and that defines a prebiotic. So prebiotics increase short chain fatty acids. And then we wanted to see, is there more microbes in the gut? So are we promoting more microbes? And what microbes are those? Are they beneficial or are they not, right? Because you've probably heard some bacteria in your gut are very beneficial, whereas others are not and can cause health issues. All right. So what we saw was all of our mushroom tested actually increase the total quantity of bacteria in the gut. So that was really exciting. So we saw that they all were at that prebiotic effect. And we also saw, and this is very unusual, that all the mushrooms increase all short-chain fatty acid. Usually a prebiotic will like increase 1 or 2, but the mushrooms really increase all 3 of them, and that was very unexpected and very exciting. Yes?
And this is with the mycelium and the fruiting body?
Yeah, so it's not an extract, it's the whole.
Just dried and milk.
Yeah. Which would contain all the fiber elements, right?
Oh,
Right, so that's important for the prebiotic effect, whereas, you know, an alcohol extract, for example, would not really. In the water extract, you would have some beta-glucans potentially, so some of that efficacy would be there. All right. So you saw that they all had an effect, and we wanted to understand, like, okay, well, is it just the beta-glucans that's causing this effect, right? If they're all kind of responding the same way on a short-chain fatty acid perspective. But here we looked at all the beneficial species and which mushroom increase which one. So in the color boxes, you see lion's mane increase the density of only certain positive bacteria, beneficial bacteria. And that was different from reishi, and cordyceps was different. So essentially this tells us that it's not a beta-glucan story. There's something else in the mushrooms that's unique to each of these species that is causing that specific effect. And what was really interesting is, you know, we didn't really cheer for cordyceps in this study. We were like, oh, turkey tail's gonna blow this thing out of the water. You know, reishi, oh, we'll just throw cordyceps in there. But in every study we do, we include cordyceps, and it always kind of wins. And we're like, well, digestive health, certainly not, right? And it did. It was the one that helped us get the most butyrate. And what we see in pink here is that it actually enriched all those species that specifically increase butyrate production in the gut. So it was very specific to those. And then the other really surprising thing is we have a product called Master Blend, which is just a blend of 10 of our species. And I thought, well, this is probably just going to have like a baseline effect, right? It's got a little bit of all the mushrooms, so it's just going to be like the lesser effect of all kind of thing. But it actually had a really unique fingerprints. You see that it actually promoted the growth of the most species, so there was some kind of, we don't know why, but it was really interesting. It had a very broad effect. Yeah.
With the master blend, was it the same dosage compared to like individual ones?
Yep.
So the whole mix, same.
Yeah. So it was less of each individual one, right? So that's why we expected it to like be kind of meh.
Yeah.
But
Very cool.
it was. All right. Next slide. Do you want to cover this one, Jay?
Sure.
So this is like fresh off the press research. We just got results 10 days ago. So.
Just made the chart. But it's really cool. So Julie's already given a bit of background on butyrate and why it's so important to our bodies. And so this is in a treatment over 12 days in the same artificial gut model, colon. And the blue line there is our cordyceps, and then the green line is inulin, which is a really popular prebiotic fiber that you can get at your grocery store. And it's so fascinating that cordyceps increases butyrate production, not just more than inulin, but it consistently increased it over all of the days, as where with inulin you just kind of get this spike in the beginning and then it goes down. And a lot of that influence is because of the species of bacteria that cordyceps is enriching, is butyrate producing bacteria. So this was really interesting data that we're super excited to share with you guys.
And so going back to lion's mane, we talked about lion's mane for cognitive health, and we know that the microbiome is related to cognitive health as well. So we wanted to understand, is there, okay, so lion's mane has prebiotic effect. Is there a correlation with mood, energy, or cognition somehow beyond butyrate? And so we fed the microbiome this lion's mane, and what we saw is an increase in the production of dopamine, GABA, and tryptamine following consumption of lion's mane, which has some connection with our mood. So GABA and dopamine have a big impact on our energy level and mood. And tryptamine was really interesting. Maybe that's why people claim they have strange or vivid dreams when they consume mushrooms. It may be coming from, it may be the reason why. We were actually surprised to see this, and we actually repeated the experiment to be sure that it was there, and it was. So. These are results from a clinical trial that we did in the US. So we recruited about 80 people that were under 40 years old and wanted to understand the impact of lion's mane on fatigue, so their level of energy and mood. And we saw significant increase in dose. And so that might be linked to what we just talked about, the GABA and dopamine production. And it speaks to lion's mane multi-pronged benefit on cognitive health. So you may have heard of lion's mane having things like erinacines, ericinones, and ericerins in it. All three compounds promote nerve growth factor production, which is involved in nerve repair and nerve growth. By the way, when I was in high school, I was told that nerves don't repair and you're born with the neurons you have in your head and they will never repair. Now we know that's false and we actually can repair, but there's very few substances that are known to promote that, and lion's mane is one of them. So it produces those molecules, and that's part of the activity of lion's mane. But this work shows you that there's also this whole other cognitive health benefit that comes through its effect on the microbiome, because those molecules I talked about have nothing to do with GABA and dopamine and so on. So kind of a multi-pronged cognitive health benefit. So very fascinating work. And I think that's it. Yes?
I guess I'll ask a question about like bioavailability with the ex vivo as well. I'll try and sum up two questions at once. This stuff has to get through the stomach and through the digestion.
Yep.
Any sort of neuroactive stuff, if it's acting on the microbiome, it's got to get into the gut.
Yep.
If it's not, it's got to get absorbed. I'm curious if there are studies on doing some sort of a digestion, a pre-digestion of the mushrooms to see how that impacts these.
So the ex vivo studies is an artificial gut model, so there is a digestion step.
So that'll be coming up.
So it's part of, so you're essentially pre-digesting, and then you're looking at what would be happening in the colon.
Is that part of the study then?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a container that represents each part of the digestive tract with a different buffer, and
Yeah.
it gets to the colon.
So it doesn't look like a human, like a cutout of the digestive, but it's essentially like, I think 9 vessels.
Yeah.
And they each represent one step of the digestion with the different enzymes, you know, the amylases in the mouth, and then, and so on and so forth, and the high acidic conditions of the stomach. And then you have the colonic fermentation at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the back, you had that question for a while, sorry.
What amount of mushrooms you were consuming? Was it a non-mushroom diet or like a regular normal amount one could eat?
It's a normal amount that one could eat. Yeah, because they did eat it. I want to say it was that study with, you're talking about the lion's mane study?
Yeah.
That was with an extract. So it was in a capsule at 350 milligrams, I think. But I can give you the reference. It's at the bottom of the slide too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the slides you had a list of comparators, like master blend, Cordyceps militaris, and then there was one that said grass blend. What was the GRAS? What does that stand for?
Generally recognized as safe, so it's it's a FDA term. They have a list of food substances that are generally recognized as safe, and at M2 we've actually applied for a few of our species to be on that list, which was really cool, way to change the industry. And so now they can be used in food products, and so that was just a blend of our mushroom that was more targeted towards food products.
Yeah, so a lot of mushrooms traditionally, right, like reishi, it's woody, so you can't eat it. So according to the FDA, that means that there's no history of safe use as food. It's a supplement ingredient, right? So it can be used in supplement, but not in food. So essentially to show that you could use it in a food, like a mushroom coffee, for example, we had to do all kinds of toxicology studies to showcase the safety of the ingredient, even though there's decades and decades of use in supplements. So it's a little bit of a wonky system, but that's what it is. Yeah. Yes. What?
I'm curious about whether or not heat plays a factor in how efficient or the efficacy of whether it's a cooked mushroom or a product, a powdered mushroom that can be put in tea or coffee. Does heat do anything to destroy any part of that? What are the benefits of it, or reduce the benefits?
Yes, certainly. Oh, you can pick.
Yeah, so I mean, Julie's the chemist, but yeah, so heat definitely degrades some chemical compounds, and some are more sensitive than others. So we, when we dehydrate our mushrooms, they're exposed to heat, and so as far as our mushroom studies, they have been heated, and they're still effective. And
it's a pretty low heat though, so
yeah.
we dry under 200 Fahrenheit, so it's pretty gentle. I would say like for the fiber benefit, heat doesn't matter. So you could put a bunch of mushrooms in, you know, a soup for hours and hours, and the fiber will still be there, the beta-glucans will still be there. On something like lion's mane, those compounds that I talked about that support nerve growth factors, they're actually quite heat sensitive. So if you're including mushrooms in a recipe, maybe just put them at the very end, right? So that you don't expose those products to heat, or, you know, supplement like ours are processed in a way that we're maintaining those compounds, yeah. So, I mean, traditionally, in traditional Chinese medicine, like for example, reishi was served as a decoction, same with chaga, right? So it was boiled for hours, and there's certainly a lot of benefits in that, right? Like reishi has some triterpenes that are rock solid when it comes to heat, and the fiber would still be there, but like with anything, there are some chemicals that are more heat sensitive, and so you're losing some of that by heating them. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so this information is confusing me a little. I got the memo that it's good to take lion's mane, so I've been purchasing a big quantity every week, chopping them up, and I was told to roast them because of the fact that there was some chemical that could be harmful to them. So they're saying that's not true.
So in some mushrooms, there's something called agaritin. So like the agaricus species will have it, and so you need to cook those to burn off, but that would happen like almost immediately when you cook them because it's very, very heat sensitive.
This is lion's.
Yeah, so for lion's mane, I mean, fresh mushrooms can have like all kinds of bacteria growing on them and different molds, so you do want to like heat them up, right, to reduce that load. But yeah, you will lose some of the benefits, but then the fiber will still be there, and that will impact on the microbiome. You'll still have that benefit there. So if you're really trying to get those nerve growth factor molecules, then you could get a supplement. Yeah.
Supplement would be better.
What's that?
You're saying a supplement would be better then?
I'm not saying that it'd be better, but if you're trying to capture kind of that full spectrum, yeah. Yes. My God, you guys are great with questions.
Yeah, that's great.
When the supplements or the food or whatever, when it's traveling through the stomach acid, is it pretty good surviving it to get past there? Did you lose anything in the process of the stomach acid?
We didn't test like at each point in the digestion process. We just tested at the colon, so after it went through each of the different containers. It's a great question. There are definitely some compounds that are more acid sensitive, but there's also definitely a lot of efficacy that survives through the acid conditions to the colon. So.
One more. How can we tell what is the best product? I mean, with lion's mane, let's say, because there's so many supplements, so many companies produce. What do we look for on the label?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's like, there's definitely, it depends on what you're trying to do with the supplement, right? And all kinds of applications. A little bit like with herbal medicine, right? Like a tea is valid and a tincture can be valid depending on your lifestyle. So, I mean, the first thing is like, what are you gonna take? If you hate taking capsules and you buy the capsules and you never take them, then they won't work, right? They have no chance. So find a product that you can actually include in your ritual, in your everyday health. Then the second part is, you know, there's a lot of fly-by-night companies, so try to buy from a company that's been around for a while, and you know, maybe you know a little bit about their quality guardrails and things like that. So I would say that's the next part. And then, I mean, we're a big proponent of having both the mycelium and the fruit body in the product just to have a full spectrum, but there's tons of really great products that are fruit body only out there. So I would say it kind of depends on the species, and so if you have a good naturopath or health practitioner, they can recommend something. But I would say, like, stay away from Instagram companies that pop up on your feed and that you've never heard of before, that have a guy, a tech bro with a man bun telling you to consume mushroom. No offense to the man bun, but yes.
So when it comes to like incorporating the mushrooms as like a medicine more into your diet, like let's say you are taking like a blood thinner. I know with Ryan's main and Cordyceps, he was saying that like if you're taking blood thinners, don't take them, or like can you just incorporate them slowly, or is a master blend better when it comes to like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I can't really recommend with medication some of the interactions, but definitely, I mean, for example, reishi has some impact on and correlation with blood thinners, so I would say consult with your doctor. But at the same time, like, some of these mushrooms are used in adjuvant therapy with chemotherapy, right? In like hardcore pharmaceutical settings. So there's research out there that talk about the interaction between mushrooms and drugs. I'm just not a specialist, so I can't really speak to your specific case. Yeah.
Yeah, they do have a gentle effect on reducing blood pressure by a vasodilating effect, but then you add it to the effect of the drug, and you can monitor it, and then you can back off a little bit on the pharmaceutical stuff, which is consult with the doctor. And also, if you're going to have surgery, you should probably stop some of the clot, because it tends to have some antiplatelet getting back to where you don't clot it, which is generally business. If you've got a big surgery, you have a wound and stuff, you know, not so much.
Yes.
So my question is this safe to take every day? So like cordyceps, reishi, lion's mane, that's something that's safe to take every day if you want to for supplements?
I
do. Okay.
Yeah.
Double checking. And then you ever know if it's safe for like all ages by any chance? Like, do you guys know any of that?
There's very little research in kids.
Right.
There's some on reishi that was done on children specifically, but there's not a lot of research in impact at a young age, just because it's well, yeah, it's just it's harder to fund those kinds of studies and so on, but
Yeah.
Oh.
What research are you interested in over the next 1 to 2 years that you haven't sort of explored, or are just curious to find out about the findings with?
So much. I'm really, there was just a paper that came out on mycology and women's health, so I'm really excited to see more for women's health in the area. I'm of course excited about the studies that we'll be doing, and excited to see more about the microbiome and gut-brain axis as well.
Yeah, so we're following up from some of the work that we just presented with a human clinical trial looking at digestive health impacts of some of these mushrooms, and looking at like impact on bloating, feeling of fullness, and metabolic health, and then we'll be collecting microbiome samples too, so in real humans. So excited about that. And we're doing a lot of work on sport performance and cordyceps. So not only impact on VO2 max and endurance, which we've done a clinical before, showing improvements in VO2 max and endurance with Cordyceps, but we're following up on that. And then also looking at like time of reaction and focus as it relates to that species. So.
Thank you.
Jay, did you buy those pants at one of those vendors out there?
I didn't. I actually forgot where I bought them.
Okay, so if you've listened carefully, you'll be able to answer these questions, and if you can, you'll win this swag bag here. Okay.
Are we shouting out or raising hands?
Raising hands, that might be easier. Okay. Steve, help us keep an eye on the crowd too, who has their hands up. Okay. So, Cordyceps improved the quantity of certain species of bacteria in the gut that produced a specific short-chain fatty acid. Which short-chain fatty acid was it?
Oh.
I see a blue sweater there.
Butyrate.
Butyrate, yes.
Enjoy.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Those are really cool.
That was fun.
I'm very interested in this one.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering because there is a